The air above Vector 9 roiled with fire and smoke, turning the colony's night sky into a canvas of war. Captain Yarrick Connors moved like a ghost through the crumbling alleys, his pulse steady despite the chaos. The distant wail of sirens was drowned by the rhythmic thudding of orbital bombardment. He knew what that meant. The invaders weren't here for resources. They were here to erase this place. His squad huddled behind the remains of a supply outpost, their armor dusted with soot. Yarrick counted 3 left. They had been 10 just a few hours ago. "Command's gone silent," Sergeant Hale muttered, checking his rifle. "We're on our own." Yarrick exhaled through his nose, scanning the flickering lights of distant skirmishes. The invaders weren't human, and they weren't indiscriminate. They struck with precision, as if searching for something or someone. A distant scream broke through the gunfire. It wasn't the pained howl of a dying soldier, but something different. Sharper, desperate. Yarrick tensed. "We move," he ordered. That came from the inner district. Hale and the others didn't question him. There was no one left to take orders from except Yarrick, and after 2 years fighting in the void, they had learned to trust his instincts. They moved fast, silent, navigating the remains of the colony with hardened efficiency. The scream came again, closer now. Yarrick lifted his weapon, rounding a half-demolished building. His eyes locked onto the source. A woman. She was pressed against a collapsed transport freighter, breathing hard, her dark eyes flicking between the advancing alien patrol and the fire-scorched wreckage. She was alone, unarmed, and her clothing dark, unfamiliar fabric clinging to her form was unlike anything a miner or colonist would wear. Yarrick didn't think. He moved. The first shot rang out as he sprinted forward, rolling behind a chunk of durasteel as the alien patrol opened fire. Blue energy blasts struck the ground around him, sizzling against the ruined pavement. His squad responded with precision, Hale and the others firing disciplined bursts that sent the creature scattering. Yarrick reached the woman in seconds, his hand clamping around her wrist. "Can you run?" he asked, already pulling her up. She stared at him, breathing hard. Then, with a nod, she moved. They sprinted, weaving between cover as his squad covered their retreat. The woman moved fast, keeping up despite the uneven terrain. When they reached a momentary lull, Yarrick caught a glimpse of her face. Strong features, a delicate scar tracing her temple, strands of dark hair stuck to her forehead. She looked wrongly placed here, like she belonged in a world far removed from war. They didn't stop until they reached an abandoned bunker, half buried beneath rubble. Yarrick ushered her inside, the last echoes of gunfire fading as Hale and the others covered their entry. He turned to her, gripping his rifle. "Who are you?" he demanded. The woman hesitated, studying him as if deciding how much to reveal. "Liara." Her voice was smooth, but there was something odd in the way she spoke. Yarrick narrowed his eyes. "You're not from the colony." Liara hesitated before shaking her head. "No." Hale exhaled sharply, watching her with suspicion. "If she's not from Vector, what the hell is she doing here?" Liara glanced toward the entrance, her posture tense, like a caged animal waiting for the door to open. "I was hiding," she admitted. "They're looking for me." Yarrick's muscles tensed. "The invaders?" She nodded. A long silence stretched between them. The squad had fought these creatures for days without understanding their purpose. Now, standing before them, was the answer they didn't know they were looking for. Yarrick studied her carefully. She didn't look afraid in the way most refugees did. She looked wary, calculating. He exhaled, shifting his grip on his weapon. "Then you're coming with us." Liara's expression flickered with surprise. "You don't even know what I am." Yarrick's lips twitched in something almost resembling a smirk. "No, but I know a whole army's trying to kill you, and that means keeping you alive is worth something." Hale muttered a curse under his breath but didn't argue. The squad was tired, battered, but they were soldiers first. Orders or not, Yarrick had made the call. Outside, the sky burned with the promise of more destruction. The colony wouldn't last another day. If they wanted to keep moving, they needed a new plan. Yarrick turned to Liara, meeting her gaze. "Hope you can keep up." Her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "I think you'll find I'm full of surprises." The tunnels beneath Vector 9 were carved for emergency evacuations, but tonight they served as a battleground. The rhythmic hum of alien patrol drones echoed through the metallic corridors, their sensor lights sweeping over collapsed beams and scorched walls. Yarrick pressed himself against the cold surface, holding his breath as a red glow passed inches from his face. Across from him, Liara remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable in the dim light. The drone whirred, scanning the area one last time before drifting further into the darkness. Yarrick exhaled, shifting his grip on his rifle. "We can't keep running like this," Hale whispered from behind. His voice was rough with exhaustion, his armor coated in dust and dried blood. "They're closing off every exit." Yarrick knew he was right. The Drakenar weren't just searching for survivors, they were hunting Liara. Every route they tried was either blocked or crawling with enemy patrols. If they didn't find a way out soon, they'd be cornered. Liara studied the passage ahead, her brow furrowed. "There's a service hatch 2 levels down," she murmured. "It leads to the old docking bay." Yarrick glanced at her. She had been leading them with precision, avoiding danger with an uncanny sense of awareness. He hadn't questioned it until now. "How do you know that?" A hesitation. Then she met his gaze. "Because I've been here before." Silence settled between them. Yarrick searched her face for deception, but all he found was quiet certainty. The pieces were starting to fit together. The invader's obsession with finding her, her knowledge of the colony's layout, her unnatural reflexes. He didn't press her. "Not yet." "Then we move." They descended through the wreckage in silence, avoiding the ever-present watch of their pursuers. The deeper they went, the more the walls bore signs of hasty evacuations. Abandoned equipment, flickering emergency lights, the occasional discarded helmet of a fallen soldier. Yarrick had seen enough war to recognize a losing fight. Vector 9 was already lost. As they neared the lower levels, Liara slowed, her body tense. Yarrick followed her gaze toward a section of the tunnel where the walls pulsed with a faint blue light. Unlike the scorched metal surrounding it, this area was pristine, untouched. He felt the hairs on his arms rise. "This isn't human tech," Hale muttered. Liara exhaled, brushing her fingers over the glowing surface. "No, it isn't." Yarrick tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then whose is it?" She turned to face them fully, her dark eyes steady. "Mine." The words hung in the stale air, a quiet confession wrapped in inevitability. Yarrick felt Hale stiffen beside him, his fingers hovering over his trigger. The silence stretched until Liara spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I'm not human." Yarrick had suspected, but hearing it aloud was different. The tension in the air shifted, thick with unspoken thoughts. Hale took a slow. The first blast tore through the corridor, sending molten shrapnel raining down in a deadly cascade. Yarrick moved on instinct, shoving Liara behind a support beam as the shockwave rattled his bones. The Drakenar had arrived in force. Hale gritted his teeth, checking his rifle. "We're out of time, Captain." Yarrick peeked around the corner. Half a dozen Drakenar warriors advanced through the narrow passage, their plated exoskeletons gleaming under the emergency lights. Their weapons pulsed with the same eerie blue energy that hummed through the walls. More would be coming. Liara worked frantically at the panel beside the hidden chamber. "I need another minute to override the security locks." Yarrick exchanged a look with Hale. They didn't have a minute. He pressed the barrel of his rifle against the stone-cold floor, exhaling slowly. "Hale, cover fire. Draw them out." Hale nodded grimly, stepping into position. The moment his weapon flared to life, the tunnel erupted into chaos. Yarrick moved fast, using the distraction to sprint forward, sliding into cover behind a half-collapsed support beam. He fired in controlled bursts, aiming for the gaps in the Drakenar's armor. One dropped, its body convulsing as blue blood splattered across the walls. The others kept coming. Liara swore under her breath, her fingers flying across the panel. "Almost there." Yarrick reloaded, his heart hammering. The Drakenar were relentless, pressing forward even as their numbers thinned. One leaped over a pile of debris, landing barely a foot from him. Yarrick didn't hesitate. He swung his rifle up, catching the creature under the jaw. Staggered, but not enough. Clawed hands lashed out, scraping against his chest plate. He rolled with the impact, drawing his knife in a fluid motion. The blade flashed in the dim light before sinking deep between the creature's ribs. It let out a guttural hiss before collapsing. "Yarrick!" Liara's voice cut through the chaos. He turned in time to see the chamber door slide open. The energy core pulsed, casting an ethereal glow across the wreckage. But the Drakenar weren't retreating. They knew what was at stake. The remaining warriors pressed forward, one of them raising a device to its wrist. Yarrick's gut twisted. A beacon. They were calling reinforcements. No, not now. Hale saw it too. Without hesitation, he surged forward, tackling the Drakenar before it could complete the signal. The two crashed against the wall in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Yarrick fired into the massive movement, but he was too late. The device flashed red before detonating in a concussive explosion. The shockwave threw Yarrick backward, his head slamming against the metal floor. His vision swam. Distantly, he heard Liara scream his name. He forced himself to move, his body screaming in protest. Smoke and debris clouded the air. But one thing was clear. Hale wasn't standing. Yarrick's breath hitched. Hale lay sprawled against the wreckage, blood pooling beneath him. Liara knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his chest. But Yarrick knew. The moment he saw the vacant look in Hale's eyes, he knew. A cold, bitter weight settled in his gut. Liara's hands trembled as she pulled away, her expression raw with sorrow. "He saved us." Yarrick clenched his jaw, grief battling with rage. There wasn't time to mourn. Not yet. Footsteps echoed from the tunnels. Reinforcements were coming. Liara stood, her face pale but resolved. "The core is ready. We can use its power to escape." Yarrick turned to her, his heart still pounding. "What do you mean?" She exhaled, stepping closer to the pulsing artifact. "This core isn't just energy. It bends space, shifts reality. If I synchronize it with my genetic signature, I can open a rift." Yarrick's mind reeled. He had heard of rift technology before, but nothing like this. Nothing powerful enough to transport them across systems in an instant. Liara met his gaze. "It's our only chance." Yarrick looked back at Hale's motionless form. He had given them this moment. They had to take it. More shadows stretched along the walls. The Drakenar were close. He turned back to Liara and nodded. "Do it." Liara stepped into the chamber, pressing her palm against the core. The moment her skin made contact, the structure shook, sending arcs of blue lightning crackling through the air. Yarrick shielded his eyes as the energy condensed into a single point, a swirling mass of light that expanded outward, warping the space around it. The temperature dropped, and a low hum filled the air. Then, with a sound like reality tearing, the rift opened. Beyond it lay a vast expanse of stars, an unfamiliar sky painted with cosmic light. Yarrick's instincts screamed at him. It was unnatural, unstable, but he grabbed Liara's hand and pulled her forward. The Drakenar burst into the chamber just as they leaped through the portal. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world snapped around them. For a split second, Yarrick felt nothing, no weight, no sound, no time. Then they crashed into solid ground. He gasped. The breath ripped from his lungs. The sky above them was no longer the burning remains of Vexter 9, but a vast alien horizon, streaked with colors he had never seen. They were safe. For now. Yarrick turned to Liara, his pulse still racing. "Where are we?" She looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the endless stars. "Home." The air smelled different here, crisper, charged with an energy Yarrick couldn't place. He forced himself onto his hands and knees, his muscles aching from the jump through the rift. Around him, the alien landscape pulsed with bioluminescent hues, casting soft blue and violet glows across the terrain. Jagged cliffs stretched toward a twin-moon sky, their dark surfaces glistening as if coated in liquid silver. The land felt untouched, sacred. He turned his head and found Liara kneeling nearby, one hand pressed to the earth. Her breath came fast, but her expression wasn't one of fear. If anything, it was reverence. Liara. His voice came rough, heavy with exhaustion. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes, inhaling deeply as if the very air filled some void within her. When she finally opened them, something unreadable flickered in her gaze. "This is Zephyrin soil," she whispered. "I'm home." Yarrick pushed himself to his feet, scanning their surroundings. They had barely escaped the Draconair, but they weren't out of danger yet. The rift technology had thrown them light years away. But how far? And for how long? A gust of wind carried a strange melody through the air, a hum that resonated through his chest, almost as if the planet itself was alive. Liara rose, her movements slow and deliberate. He had seen her fight, seen her navigate human settlements like a ghost, but this was different. Here she moved like she belonged. Yarrick swallowed hard, glancing at the sky. "Are we safe here?" Liara exhaled. For now. The reality of their situation pressed down on him. Hale was gone. Vector 9 had fallen. The Draconair were still out there, and if they could track Liara before, they would find a way to do it again. His grip tightened around his rifle. "We need a plan." Liara's expression darkened. "I need to see my people first." Yarrick hesitated. "Are they still alive?" She turned to face him fully, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw something otherworldly in her. A quiet but unshakable certainty. They have to be. The journey across the alien terrain was both breathtaking and unnerving. The land shimmered with unseen energy, reacting subtly to Liara's presence. Vines curled toward her fingers. Luminescent rivers pulsed in rhythm with her steps. Yarrick had been to countless worlds, but none felt as alive as this one. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, Jarrek's instincts remained sharp. Even in unfamiliar territory, he knew better than to let his guard down. The Draconair were relentless, and if they had a way to follow them, it was only a matter of time before this sanctuary became a battleground. Liara led him toward the cliffs, where an ancient structure rose from the mist. It was unlike anything Yarrick had seen. An intricate network of crystalline towers and sweeping arches, built into the rock itself. Though time had worn its edges, the structure still stood with quiet defiance. Liara's pace quickened. This was once a temple. Yarrick scanned the area. "Looks abandoned." Liara didn't answer. She stepped forward, placing her palm against one of the crystalline walls. The air shifted, and suddenly the ruins weren't ruins at all. A ripple passed through the structures, and in its wake, the temple bloomed to life. Walls that had once looked crumbled now stood whole, glowing veins of energy tracing their patterns. The sound of distant voices, not echoes, but real voices, emerged from within. Yarrick raised his rifle instinctively. "What the hell?" Liara turned to him, her eyes glowing. "They're here." Before he could react, figures emerged from the temple's entrance. They moved with silent grace, their forms draped in flowing garments that shimmered in the moonlight. Their eyes, like Liara's, held an unnatural depth, ancient and knowing. The tallest among them stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Liara. His expression wavered between disbelief and relief. "Princess Liara," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You've returned." Yarrick barely concealed his shock. Even knowing the truth, hearing it spoken so plainly still sent a jolt through him. Liara squared her shoulders, her voice steady. "I have, but we don't have much time." The elder nodded, his expression darkening. "Then you already know." Yarrick frowned. "Know what?" The elder finally turned his gaze to him, studying him with unnerving intensity. "That the Draconair are coming." Liara's hands clenched at her sides. "How do you know?" The elder gestured toward the sky. "Because the stars whisper of war, and the Draconair have never left anything unfinished." Yarrick cursed under his breath. He had known it was only a matter of time, but hearing it confirmed sent a sharp spike of urgency through him. "We can't fight them alone," Liara said, her voice raw. "We need to rally what's left of our forces." The elder's expression grew somber. "Our people are scattered. Many have gone into hiding. Others have lost faith." Yerrick stepped forward. "Then give them something to believe in." The elder studied him, the weight of years in his gaze. Finally, he exhaled. "Come inside. There is much to discuss." The temple's interior was unlike anything Yerrick had ever seen. The walls breathed, shifting in subtle pulses of light. At its center, an ancient star map hovered, glowing constellations shifting as if alive. Liara approached the map, running her fingers over its surface. "This is the last record of our fleet," she murmured. "If even a fraction of them are still out there." Yerrick crossed his arms. "Then we find them." The elder studied them both. "And if they do not answer?" Liara lifted her chin. "Then we stand alone." A heavy silence followed. Yerrick could see the doubt in the elder's eyes, the weight of history pressing down on him. But there was something else too, hope, fragile but present. After a long pause, the elder placed a hand over his heart. "Then let us prepare for war." The decision sent ripples through the temple. Messengers were dispatched, old weapons unearthed. Yerrick could feel the energy shifting, as if the very air hummed with renewed purpose. As night fell, Liara stood on the balcony, staring out at the alien horizon. Yerrick stepped beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "For the first time in a long time, I think I am." Yerrick leaned on the railing. "So, what happens now?" Liara's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Now, we take back our home.